Hello, and thank you for joining us today on Workforce Institute Radio. I'm Joyce Maloney, Director of the Workforce Institute at Kronos, and today I'm speaking with our very smart board members, Bob Clements and William Tincup. Bob is Senior Principal at Axiom Group, a leading workforce management consulting firm, and William is the CEO of the HR consultancy Tincup & Co. He's co-host of the daily HR radio podcast called Drive Through HR, and one of the country's leading thinkers on user adoption of technology as well as social media applications for human resources. So William and Bob, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Glad to be here.
Pleasure. So today we're talking about the cloud, which we do a lot. Our board got together back in December, and one of the things that we discussed at our meeting was what we thought the top workforce management trends in 2014 would be, and sure enough, the cloud made our top 5 list again. What everybody on our board agreed was that we need to get past the hype phase and start talking about how a business can assess whether or not cloud makes sense for them, and then how to proceed if it does. So I'm going to ask our very experienced board members here a few questions to help us understand how to move forward in the cloud. And Bob, I'm going to start with you. So my first question is, how can an organization assess whether a cloud solution will be right for them?
Well, I think that when you think about any new solution, the first thing you need to think about are the requirements. And so you need to look at what you need the solution to do. And then when you're going off to look for that solution, especially today in the HR world, cloud you can't help but have cloud be one of your considerations. And I think when you look at that, you need to see how well that cloud solution fits your functional and business requirements. I think the other thing that you need to look at is the cost. And certainly the cost model changes when you look at a cloud solution versus an on-premise solution. When you look at the cloud solution, your cost structure changes from something that's a capitalized cost to an operating expense, and for some people that's really important. I think the other thing to look at is how does that cost of the cloud solution compare to the cost of the on-premise solution. And on the surface, the cost of the cloud solution will look very inexpensive over month to month, but then over a period of time it starts to look a little bit more expensive. But you need to offset that against the cost that will be reduced internally, so the cost of hardware, the cost of networking, the cost of people, et cetera. So I think you really need to look at that cost-benefit equation to understand if cloud is good for you. Okay,
thank you. And William, we know there's been a full court press on the cloud. There have been cloud solutions around for HR for really well over a decade now, I think with recruiting really having led the way. But we also know that there's not a one-size-fits-all solution for any business. As Bob just said, you need to start with the requirements of your business and figure out whether a solution makes sense. So what are some of the reasons that cloud might not make sense for an organization?
Yeah, I think that the general theme is, let's meet users where they are. Let's meet admins where they are. Let's meet buyers of technology where they are. And these are all good themes, by the way, meeting people where they are. So let's say someone's just done a major upgrade to an on-prem solution. So pick a great on-prem solution that's been around for a while, and they've just gone through a major upgrade, and they've invested substantially in that upgrade. Well, you know what? The cloud discussion, albeit probably a great discussion to have, the timing's off. So I think in some cases I would look at this and say to myself, does on-prem make sense? Does cloud make sense to them and their industry and their situation? And I think that we're past the era, hopefully, we're past the era of fear being kind of around the cloud, around security and privacy, because there was a lot of that a while back where people were scared to go to cloud. And I think we're past that. I really do, and I hope I'm not in a bubble about that, but I hope we're past that. But some industries, I think, are still lagging, and a couple of them that I keep my eye on are the financial industry, the healthcare industry, and the defense industry. They're still letting everyone else kind of go first and be innovative and do all the things in the cloud, and they're going to get there. And there are great case studies, obviously, in all three of those industries where they are in the cloud. But I think where it might not make sense is when someone's just made a significant financial investment on an on-prem kind of a new version or a new iteration or just buying new on-prem software, the cloud's not going to make sense for them for a while.
Okay. Any specific disasters that you can think of in the recent past that might give people pause for thought about the cloud?
The pros and cons, for me, they kind of fall out like this. The pros, they're real simple. It's all about change. The pros of going for, like, if you've been in kind of an on-prem solution for a long time, and let's just say things have just gotten static. Maybe you don't feel like, for whatever reason, you're not getting as much out of the solution. Your users might not be using it to the max, for whatever reason. Like there's so many reasons that maybe your on-prem solution is just not working out for you. Well, the pro is change. Let's just change, and moving from that to something else. There's a newness effect, and there's kind of watershed moments around, okay, we can get trained in something new, we can learn something new, and it's going to be fantastic. And, it's like you start off the year with all this hope and optimism. Well, that's new software. It's a shiny object, and it's hope and optimism. We're going to all learn something. Okay, great. So that's the pro. Now the con is the exact same thing. It's change. And what we know is people hate change. All of us. It doesn't. This knows no culture. This knows no religion, no sexual orientation, none of that stuff. We all hate change. Some of us hate it less, but we all hate change. So again, same scenario. You're moving from one to the other. You're moving from on-prem to the cloud. The biggest con is it isn't a failure around data or privacy or something got done incorrectly or whatever. Like every implementation has those things. I would tell you secretly. I would never tell you that publicly. But every implementation has those types of things. But really what it comes down to is managing change. And that would be your biggest con is in your specific environment with your audience, with your employees. How are they going to be able to consume this change?
Yeah, agreed. And it's a lot of change on the provider side, too. I look at our own company where we've gone from, a handful of cloud customers to over half of our customers being hosted in the cloud. It's required massive investments in people and infrastructure, but, to your point, also in changing the way we think about how we help customers, how we manage customers, because for those cloud customers, we're taking on a lot more responsibility. And Bob, you see this on both sides. You're helping companies roll out workforce management solutions. What are you hearing from customers who've made that transition about maybe what could they have done better, or why are they glad that they moved to the cloud?
Well, I'll say that I've not ever talked to anybody that's moved to the cloud that's had buyer's remorse, right, where they've got over there and go, oh my gosh, this is so different than I expected. It was a big mistake. Generally speaking, when people move to the cloud, it's different than they expect because there are things that they haven't necessarily thought about. To William's point, so often people get focused on kind of the security side of things and the privacy side of things, and while those are important kind of table stakes that the SaaS providers have to give us, we can't get wrapped around the axle worrying about those things and forgetting about the other things like, how do I deal with uptime? How do I deal with performance issues? How do I take upgrades? How do I access my data? Those types of things. That's where the rubber meets the road from a cloud perspective, and those things are, I think, as we become more sophisticated buyers of cloud technology, we're going to start asking those kind of the next level questions. I also think, I love the way that you phrased the opening conversation to William about that, which is, are there any recent disasters? And again, I haven't heard of any recent disasters from a cloud perspective, but I do think that the data breaches that we're hearing about at Target and Neiman Marcus and Michaels, and I think that especially since the Target breach was related to a vendor and an HVAC vendor, I think that people are going to be, the flag's going to go up a little bit more in terms of the concern about security of a cloud-based solution. I think that in actuality, people are going to find that those cloud-based solutions are actually more secure than their on-prem versions, because this is what these people are in business to do, is to secure the data and provide that application. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the next little bit.
Yeah, I agree. I think, when, the Target Christmas time, publicity around all those data breaches was huge, and it does give people pause for thought. I think that also gets counterbalanced by just how dependent, people have become on cloud-based solutions in their private lives, whether that's, banking or checking the investment account or buying something on Amazon. And I think that people have a much better understanding now than they did 10 or 15 or 20 years ago about, they have responsibilities too about, keeping their environments secure. And I agree with you. I think it's probably causing organizations to look that much more closely at how they are securing their on-prem solutions, and probably gives them a little bit more insight and empathy for what these SaaS vendors are trying to pull off. But I also agree with you. I think William said before, it is table stakes to deliver, as a vendor, to deliver a solution that's going to have all of the right privacy and security measures in force and monitored and, reported on when they fail. So, but those are very, very big investments on the part of the vendors trying to pull this off. So, William, what about you? What do you think are the top issues that people need to be thinking about if they're going to move forward with a cloud solution?
Yeah, I think for me, I think the first thing we should look at is data portability. When you look at the cloud, is where does this data, what does it touch? What could it touch? And expanding our minds around, okay, well, if we have this data in the cloud, where else should it inform? So where should we push that data, and where should we pull other data and combining that data? So I think the cloud helps us with that thought, because I think it allows us to openly free our minds to think, you know what, it's all in the cloud. Now that it's all in the cloud, what else could we possibly be doing with this data? So I think as we think of our cloud strategy, we think of it, we have the potential to think about it differently and to give ourselves an opportunity to think of, we used to think of these things maybe even in silos or in boxes, and now with it all being in the cloud, yeah, they're still technically in databases, so they're still technically in boxes, but now they can touch each other in a different way. So I think data portability would probably be the first thing I would think about. The second thing is connecting the dots. I think the wonderful opportunity that we all have in front of us around what is typically called big data, but we've always had big data. Now it's just gotten even bigger, I guess. And with it being in the cloud, and Don Rumsfeld has this great bit. Even if you're not a fan of his, he's got this great bit about the knowns and the unknowns. So if you get a chance, go to YouTube and just put in Don Rumsfeld knowns and unknowns, and he basically explains that, hey, there's things that we know and there's things that we don't know, which is kind of obvious, but when dealing with data, there is a ton of things that we don't know. And so I think that we have a wonderful opportunity to connect dots that we would have never connected. We would have never even thought to connect before. And I think with it being in the cloud, we can connect dots and really discover the unknowns in a way that potentially we would have never been able to do before. And I think of that as kind of delivering insights. So I think one of the wonderful roles that HR could play in the future is where they act as somewhat of a translator of this data and bring back to the organization these insights of things that we would have never seen before. So again, as we contemplate the cloud, I think that there's wonderful opportunities to connect the data in ways that we wouldn't have done before, and I think we're going to learn things that we'd have never learned before if we're ready for that task. And I think that lastly, I would probably look at Salesforce.com as a wonderful example of how software can become business critical. Salesforce is a wonderful example of how powerful SaaS software, software that's delivered over the internet, and really there are businesses that can't imagine doing business without Salesforce.com. And so, and all HR and recruiting applications have that opportunity. And it's how they seize that and become, business critical software that, it's just how do you basically deeply weave yourself into an organization, become critical to the organization. It's all about insight. It's, in a lot of ways it's about making people's lives better, but it's also about the insight that you give to the organization. And last thing I would tell HR pros that listen to this is learn how to code. Take a class. Go to Code Academy, go to code.org, whatever you got to do, but take a class and learn technology. You don't have to actually program, but just understanding how code works will make you better and more relevant to your organization.
I think that I love some of the themes that you talked about there, William, and the idea of data portability and then driving insights, I think, is so critical. So from a technology perspective, your technology partner needs to be thinking about how do I get at that data so that I can share it across other applications or combine it with other cloud-based solutions to come out with interesting insights or greater visibility than I would have before. Because while we're moving the data out of our data center and into the cloud, today more than ever, it's important to get access to that data. So how am I going to do that? I think the other thing that, and this is for the technology person out there, but it becomes an HR issue, which is how is our organization changing to support a cloud-based environment versus an on-prem environment? So as I move those servers off, I have server administrators that don't need to administrate those servers anymore. But what's my development plan for them, and where are they going to go, and how do they fit into my organization in the future?
Yeah, so I think those are all really sound issues. I will say on that topic of, are people's jobs going away because of the cloud, one of the things that we found in dealing with customers is that, most of our customers have the same IT experience or IT resource experience as everybody else does, which is, the IT folks are spending 85% of their time maintaining existing systems while a backlog of desired projects from the business continues to grow. And we've actually done a bunch of research, which I'll also post in this article, with customers using our solutions who said, we're not getting rid of people. We couldn't keep up with the demand, and this allows us to shift what are frankly more administrative responsibilities out to Kronos and begin to tackle some of those projects that have been sitting in a queue that we couldn't get to because keeping what we already had up and running had to be a priority. But I do think it's a fair concern, not just about whether or not you're going to have an oversupply of certain types of skills, but you're going to use this as an opportunity to develop the skills that you need to tackle those new innovation projects, versus just keeping the servers up and running. So the thing I wanted to end on today, though, was, to think about the future, and specifically, if we put ourselves 10 years in the future, I'm going to guess that the topic of whether to cloud or not to cloud has become irrelevant. And I think about, 20 years ago, sitting in a leadership meeting at Lotus Development, which was about to become IBM, and the then chief technology officer talking about this really fantastic, company that he was learning about called Amazon, and that he had bought his first book over the internet. And at that time, Lou Gerstner, contemplating buying Lotus, and talking about the Internet said, well, I don't know why we would ever want to give our employees Internet access because they'd be sitting around watching Danish pornography all day. And that was the view at the time, that it was just a complete waste of time. So, of course, 20 years later, we can't imagine a world without the Internet. We can't imagine a world without a smartphone in our pocket. So if we propel ourselves 10 years forward, and I'll start with you, William, how do you think the conversation will have shifted 10 years from now around technology as it applies to workforce management?
Well, it's a lot like the polar ice caps. You know, if you look back and you look at how much ice has actually eroded over 100 years than in the last 10 years, they're equivalent. There's more ice that's actually gone away in the last 10 years than the last, I think, 120 years combined. 1983, Pizza Hut, the Colony, Texas, was the first time I used Workforce. It wasn't software; it was hardware. It was a punch clock. I wish I would have actually kept some of those old punch clocks, the clock in and clock out stuff. 31 years later, turns out, look at where we are now. I think the next 10 years, for me, I think workforce data and the software companies that drive that data is going to inform all kinds of HR decisions. And I think it's about connecting that workforce data in the way that we collect it. It's going to inform performance. It's going to inform compensation. It's going to inform succession. It's going to inform leadership. It's going to inform all kinds of things. Total rewards, like the world that we want, wellness, like all of these things that we think of as disparate and desperate systems. I think over the next 5, 7, and 10 years, they're not going to be disparate systems. They're going to be talking to one another, and we're going to know more about our employees and about what's going on, the health of our organization. And I think a lot of that starts with workforce data.
And what about you, Bob? What do you think?
Well, I love your story about Lotus and first book purchase and worrying about employees doing Danish porn, and I feel like we've advanced so far since then, and 10 years from now we'll advance again, where certainly we're not going to be as hung up on where the application sits per se. And I think from the end user's perspective today, when we move to the cloud, the net result is the end user should have a pretty new application to look at. They don't care if the application is in the cloud or if it's on-premise. They care about the capability that they've got and the usability of the application. I think that as we look 10 years out into the future, hopefully the same thing happens for the back end, right? The administrators aren't concerned about where the application resides. It's concerned about the data that it's providing, the capability that it's providing to the organization, and the way that the end user consumes it then is going to be radically different as well, right? No longer are we going to be concerned about the web browser and the PC. It's going to be, the wearable or the mobile device that we're using to access it. So I think that our focus is going to continue to shift much more to the end user, how they're consuming it, and then how that information is being used to affect their job and their productivity.
Yeah, I agree. And I actually have a last question for you both. Has either one of you seen the movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix?
I'm dying to see it. I just actually went to see when it was being released on DVD so I could get it from Netflix.
Oh, there you go. Have you seen it, William?
On my list, I have not seen it.
Fantastic movie. In fact, I'll put a link to it in this blog post when I publish this podcast. Really thought-provoking examination of what does it mean for software and connectivity to go just to that next level. And I would recommend this movie to anybody who thinks about these issues. It's a very entertaining movie, but it is an incredibly thought-provoking movie about what does it mean as we become more and more reliant on our personal technology to help us manage our lives. So I'm going to put in a plug for that movie. I have no financial interest in the movie whatsoever, but as I was thinking about our conversation about the future, it's a really well worth seeing examination of what could the future of technology look like in the very near term. According to the movie, it includes high-waisted pants. I'm not sure we want that to come back, but but really, really good exploration and thought-provoking exploration of these issues. So post my movie plug, I want to thank William and Bob so much for being with me today and talking about these issues. I hope our listeners will enjoy the conversation as much as I did. And to those of you who are listening, I thank you for joining us and encourage you to continue to visit us at workforceinstitute.org. Thank you very much.